Since apparently in his big house of, I don't know, 27,000 square feet, there are so many cars, there are elevators in the garage moving around. So
it was installed for his wife.
So that was really terrific. The other sort of hot issue that's been discussed, one would think over the many years that the waterfront has been an issue, has been the Hudson River Park. My earliest memory was a letter I wrote to Senator William Proxmire, which on the issue of appropriations that had to do with the park. So if you're old enough to remember William Proxmire, you know that was quite a ways ago. The current issue is that the park, which is 550 acres, 490 of which are the Hudson River. I will suggest to the trust that they do a fundraiser, and that is having all of the members of the trust bicycle on any one of those 490 acres that is the river, and I will assure you, I will pay to see that. So it's a big, thin park with some piers. I was led to believe that Arthur Schwartz might be in the audience this evening, which is, I'm sorry, he's not. Because I know he was at the Hudson River Park Trust board meeting misrepresenting my position. So it would be nice for him to be here so I could tell him to his face. I'm happy to explain my position. In the inception, the legislation that created the park was vetted through a very long process of public meetings, hearings, ad nauseum, scores of them, over at least a few years, if not more. Hundreds, literally hundreds of West Siders got an opportunity to express their opinions, and the legislation that was crafted reflected the overwhelming consensus, which was we wanted a park and we did not want high-rise development of residential, hotels, office towers that would wall us off from the river. That was the good part. The bad part was that the park was somehow supposed to be self-supporting, which is why I voted against the bill that I had worked very hard to make better than it was in the beginning. But because I felt that that was a new paradigm that I didn't agree with. I grew up in Queens. How many of you are native New Yorkers? Did you grow up in other boroughs other than Manhattan?
Yes.
No. In some of those other places, like where I grew up, we had large parks, hundreds of acres, and they didn't really produce a product that could be sold and revenue generated. And to this day, those parks exist. People can use them to fly a kite, ride a bike, whatever, picnic, play tennis. You have to have a permit, but that was at least then a modest cost. Snow, sled in the winter. Watch out for the trees. But those parks still exist. In many of those communities, those are surrounded by single-family homes that actually pay a property tax rate substantially less than the property tax rates for co-ops, condos, and rental buildings, which are viewed as commercial enterprises. And so renters pay, part of your rent is property tax. So, you know, I just feel there's a matter of fairness, economic fairness, that our park, which we are in the, Board 2 and Board 4 are among the least community boards that have the least amount of park space in the city, very densely populated, with very little recreation space. We have 60 acres, most of which is a narrow bikeway, walkway with a little bit of additional space, where you could sit on the grass or whatever, and there are a couple of piers that you can go out on, and that's great. And the, quote, commercial nodes. Pier 40 is one of those. We fought hard for 50% of the footprint to be required for open, passive, and active recreation space. And it has, over the life of the park, which is not exactly ancient history, all of, well, the park really maybe 12 years, the legislation is 14 years old, it has generated 40% of the operating budget. It's paid, those 2.5 blocks have paid a lot of dues towards the park, with very little maintenance going in, because it was going to be developed commercially, and at some point the silver bullet would come, and so the park, the trust, never really established a maintenance schedule for it, and it's falling apart in many ways. Now they are saying, and I believe Diana Taylor this evening made some question, because they were being asked, the board was being asked to allocate $1.9 million to rebuild the stairways. And it's like, why are we putting any more money into that pier? That pier has been a generator of 40% of the budget, which is why you should preserve its existing revenue source, but it has many other problems. So, in true Republican fashion, you starve something, you create a crisis, and then your solution is a solution that is providing a development opportunity for a close personal friend. And I don't know who that is, but I'm sure that it was somebody who had dinner with the mayor. So my position has been that the horse is out of the barn about having to generate revenue there. But there are people, and in 2007, some of the parents in the neighborhood commissioned a study that showed that if you consolidated in a more space-efficient fashion, consolidated the parking in an area, you could then open up other parts of the pier for incremental development of a more consistent with the park use type development. It wasn't accepted by the trust because it's not what they wanted to do. And I won't go into some of the things that they have foregone, like the revenue from the passenger ship terminal that the city is required to share with the park. In violation of the law, they aren't. They say it's because they had to repair the passenger ship terminal piers. So your park is subsidizing the repair of the passenger ship terminal, and I think there was never a public hearing to discuss that eventuality, so I think that was an illegal action.
Let's sue.
And now, there has been this suggestion that we build residential towers on Pier 40 as a way of saving the pier. In May, June, the task force was presented with the possibility of a soccer stadium or residential. And the parents who are involved in the Little League and the soccer fields were very concerned and didn't want the stadium, and were given, you know, door number 1 you hate, door number 2 is disgusting, but it's all we're offering. So they said, okay, we really hate one, we'll take 2. So some people have been stampeded into believing that those are the only options. We have fought vigorously against that and said everything should be on the table. And we are very fortunate that there is a very major New York City developer who looked at the proposal and has been public about the fact that the numbers don't add up, and Douglas Durst, someone that they cannot dismiss, like they can dismiss me because I haven't, you know, built big buildings in the city. They can't dismiss him. He came out and said the numbers don't add up. It would take forever to get that online. It's not going to be something that could save the pier, let alone the park. Plus, I don't think we'd ever get the revenue that they're alleging. So that has helped forestall the stampede. But every community board, 1, 2, and 4, were pressured vigorously by the trust to pass a resolution that was their boilerplate resolution asking the legislature to change the legislation to allow these, what I believe are inappropriate development. Board 1 resisted. Board 2, the waterfront committee, held a meeting where 90% of the people opposed it, and yet not a single word was changed in the trust's boilerplate resolution. Thank you, Arthur. And Board 4, really without any notice to the public that it would be on the agenda, without a committee meeting, it was passed as part of new business without any discussion. Shame on them. I've had conversations with the chair. And I don't think that's going to happen again. So, this current situation is that we have, you know, people have said to me, well, what's your plan, what's your plan? And I said, well, you know, there's a concept. There is a notion reviving the 2007 idea of a more compressed and efficient use of space, consolidating the parking, using stackers to, yes, candidate Romney knows a lot about car elevators, so when he is not the president, on November 7th, maybe we can get him to come by. But consolidate that space, which leaves the pier, large part of the pier, available for other kinds of development. What would that be? In my humble opinion, what are the options? Because I'm not there to say, oh, it should be this, it should be that. That is part of a public discussion. But I believe the kinds of uses that are current, that would be consistent with low impact on the park, that would have marketability, include things like the galleries that are getting squeezed out of Chelsea now because of the High Line. Beautiful, open, natural light along the waterfront. They've been paying pretty good prices in Chelsea. We can offer them a similar deal, but with much better lighting. New media companies are looking for space. A lot of the people who are working in these in that industry are younger people who would be startups or even mid-sized companies, or, you know, not just startups, but middle-range companies that are growing, that are looking for more space. A lot of their employees would be very happy to have their office on the waterfront where they could bike to work, and many of these companies can't compete with a Google that has within their own offices a place for a ping pong table and a, you know, and internal recreation, but this would give these companies an opportunity to offer outdoor space for their employees, and there's post-production, this is film, TV, there are a number of post-production facilities in the district. There's a new tax, it's not a new tax credit, it's just an expanded tax credit that will encourage, we believe, more post-production work to be done here in New York rather than having things go back to LA, they too will need additional space. And those are the kinds of things that I believe will not disrupt the nature of the park, not alter the nature of the park, but are synergistic with the neighborhood, the community uses, and I've talked to a number of people who are real estate folks who actually think that's a great idea and are eager to press forward with this as a concept, and we are in the beginning stages. The only thing that Arthur at the board meeting tonight did not misrepresent, let me just read my map, or note. He's accusing me of not wanting the park originally, which of course was nonsense. I didn't want the park to have to be a profit center. I wanted the park, but not the pernicious, which obviously I was right. They are now saying that we have to do all sorts of disgusting development to keep paying for more and more use, which, by the way, in all of these other places that have large parks, most of those neighborhoods don't have to share their neighborhood park with tens of thousands of visitors, which we do. But he's now, and now we want to start a movement to stop residential. That is not a lie. That is not a misrepresentation. I do want to start a movement